Join us as we share our experiences, strength, and hope. When the world says, give up, hope whispers, try it one more time.
What's going on, recovery family, and welcome back to Sharing Our Stories. My name is Slim with Nani Al-Jalil from Tribe Recovery Homes. Our guest is John Doubleday, sitting between us, John Doubleday from New Orleans, Louisiana. Our first, I believe it's our first guest.
First ever.
From Louisiana, New Orleans.
Wow.
That's right.
Yeah, so you got pressure to represent the entire state of Louisiana. All people in recovery from Louisiana, it's on you today.
Awesome.
On your shoulders, John.
Mahi, if this is your first time checking in with us, this is Sharing Our Stories, and this program is all about addiction and recovery. We bring in folks who have dealt with addiction to drugs and or alcohol, and we talk about not only that addiction, but also they share in their recovery, because we want people to know that, yes, recovery happens. There's a lot of people suffering from addiction to drugs and alcohol, and they just don't think that they can get sober. I know, because I was once one of those people. So we just want to share that recovery happens, and if you or somebody that you know, love, care about is suffering an addiction, let them know this program exists and that they can learn that, yeah, there's a lot of pathways to recovery, and we're going to learn about another one here today. So before we get started, Nani,
Yes.
my sweetheart, my sister from another mother.
Yes.
You and also John this week have been at the Winter Symposium
Yes.
in Colorado Springs.
We have.
Which is not what I thought a recovery meeting on the mountain, like a recovery ski week.
It is
Not at
not
all.
It's
that.
not recovery ski week.
No, it is not a ski week.
But the Winter Symposium in Colorado Springs, it's about to celebrate next year its 50th anniversary.
Yes,
All
I
right.
believe so.
That's what I learned from John. I know nothing about this until you told me earlier this week, hey, I'm going to be at the Winter Symposium. So what is it?
Yeah, so what it is, kind of a summary of it, is basically a bunch of professionals and non-professionals, and everybody gets together.
Which one are you?
I like to think of myself as a professional, Slim.
professional.
Yes, I'm a professional. But everybody gets together, and there's opportunities for lots of different seminars, but it's people within substance use, mental health, healthcare, and everybody is working together to fill in the gaps. It's evidence-based research, and people are talking about what's going on in the world and how people can work together to figure out how we can just better support people in addiction medicine and addiction and substance use, behavioral
Is it like
health
different
care.
seminars? Or you're going
Yeah,
to classes,
tons of different
meetings?
seminars. Yeah, just what's happening out there.
Yeah.
And how everybody can work together.
And you're down there for it also?
Yes, there's. I'm with Hazelbrook Sober Living, so we definitely set up a booth there as well, and we get to just connect with a lot of different community partners and share resources amongst one another, and just find out what one another's doing. What we're up to. How can we better fill those gaps, like Noni was saying, just to support our clients, more effectively.
So how'd you guys find out about it? You probably found out about it through work, Winter Symposium.
Yeah.
Where do people learn about this?
Yeah, so the way that we found out about it is, we're on lists, and they send invitations out, so you sign up for it. This was
So this is
Tribe's-
more for people in the field
Yeah,
of
you're
recovery.
in the field. Yes, you're in the field of recovery or healthcare or behavioral health. So you're in the field, and then you sign up for it. This year, Tribe had a booth. Hazelbrook obviously had a booth as well. But then other professionals or people just within the field, they go and they attend the seminars, and it's a great opportunity to network and become better connected with like-minded individuals.
All right.
And I know for Tribe, at least, I met people. I have met so many people, and just become so much more familiar with what other people are doing out there, and how we can support each other better, and how we can collaborate better. And have a greater understanding of what some of those resources are, and also where we are lacking in resources, and where we can pick up some of the pieces, and also where I see where we can help. So
What I like is that the recovery field isn't a competition. It's not
It's-
I need to be the biggest,
No.
sober living facility, and I will eat up all my competition
No.
to be on the top. And it's really a teamwork thing where everybody's
Exactly.
always working together. Like, oh, we can't take this person. Can you take this person?
Exactly.
We can't find a place for this person. This person doesn't use our services, but they need your services.
That's exactly
and everybody's
right.
always cross mingling like that. And
Absolutely.
it's so awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So that was one of the things being, Tribe Recovery Homes being a Medicaid provider for those agencies that don't accept Medicaid. It's like, how can we support each other? If you are private insurance only, if you're getting Medicaid calls, please send them our way. And for private insurances, we need to work better together so that we're making sure people have as much access to care as is possible. And those are those gaps, right? Being sure to fill those gaps.
And so, how long does this go on for down there in the Springs?
It started on Sunday.
Oh, wow.
Sunday mid-morning, and it ends tomorrow afternoon.
So it's a week-long event
Yeah.
that's happening.
Yeah, and you have vendors coming in from, different areas of the country, like Texas and
Yeah,
just
Texas
different.
was there.
Yeah, a lot of different states, and so it's really good to just connect, like Nani was saying, and
All right.
meet some of these other individuals and what they're doing.
Well, I'm going to need a full update when it's all done.
Yes.
On how you think it all went.
Yes.
Next week, that's going to be the 1st
You'll
thing.
get
is,
my full
what is the full rundown on the Winter Symposium?
You'll get my full review, Slim. You got it.
That's right. And you have to make it really exciting.
Okay.
All right, because you got to bring in the
All the
audience.
pizzazz.
That's right. You got to
Yeah.
add pizzazz, bells,
I got it.
whistles, fireworks. All right.
Got
So
it.
our guest this week, Mahai, is John Doubleday from New Orleans, Louisiana, and you work here in the Mahai at the Hazelbrook Sober Living.
Yes.
Shout out to them. Great people that have come by here before. As we just said, everybody working together. But John is our guest for sharing our stories. And I know that this is going to be a powerful share. And for those of our listeners who have been incarcerated and have wondered, about your recovery and where can you end up, I think that John is going to give you a tremendous story about where you can end up. So I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for being our guest. And our guest for sharing our stories is John Doubleday.
Thank you for having me, Slim. So my name's John Doubleday. I'm a case manager and peer recovery coach for Hazelbrook Community Center. And my path to recovery was, let's just start, I guess, with my where I started in my addiction. I started at a young age, just drinking for the most part, and then I had, progressed into smoking weed and then trying cocaine and things like that. And I really started getting in trouble probably around middle school, and just getting everything from like getting suspended to working my way to, getting expelled from 2 of my high schools. That was something that I took pretty hard because I felt like I was like constantly trying to, meet new friends or like, trying to prove myself or having to fit in, that really played a role in like, the way I had ended up behaving. I grew up with a real close-knit family. My family is Catholic, so they're very, religious, and we just grew up very close and, having a relationship with God, going to church, things like that. And I love my mom. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad, he literally just worked, worked his butt off to make sure, we didn't have need for anything, and my addiction really took a hold, like I said, from getting kicked out of those high schools, to where I would go to I would get arrested and just do some overnighters, misdemeanors like trespassing or public drunkenness or disorderly conduct. So I spent, a few nights there, here and there at Orleans Parish Prison, because that's what they call the county jail there. It's actually part of the prison. It's definitely not a good place. So I had seen, my future really heading down some dark roads, but I didn't think it was going to be too serious. So I tried to I did join the military to try to run from my problems, and I ended up joining the Marine Corps and going through boot camp at Camp Pendleton in San Diego. Of course, my addiction followed me. 9/11 had occurred right when I was reporting back in from to combat training, and I ended up providing a positive UA for marijuana. So I was super disappointed because I had been starting to get processed for discharge. And I was placed in a legal platoon, which basically you're just waiting for your paperwork to come in so that you can get your bad conduct discharge. Well, through the process of that, there was a lot of shame that I held, in because my unit was getting deployed. And I felt like that was like the first thing that I really I had graduated high school, but I didn't even attend my own graduation because I didn't even feel like I was a part of that high school. I only went to it for like a month, and so it was me completing Marine boot camp was like very big for me. Like I felt like, I had really accomplished something and made something of myself. And to go and just kind of, screw that up with my addiction, I really took that hard. A lot of those negative core beliefs that I had about myself really like sunk in at that time, and I fell back into my addiction really hard. So I ended up, breaking into a PX drunk, on base, and I ended up in the brig. I spent.
That's a gutsy move, man.
Yeah. It was not.
You're gonna break into the PX on the base.
It was not planned by any means. I mean, I literally was like blacked out, and all I remember is like running in through a glass door and just breaking into like a display case. I had a cast on my arm from getting in a fight, the week before because I would get in these blackout drinking spells, and I really wouldn't recall what I did, except bits and pieces. And I did end up in the brig behind that. I was very fortunate not to get, a lot more time than I actually did. So I ended up serving less than a year. And I was so ashamed that I didn't even tell my mom where I was at. I literally didn't call her for like 3 or 4 months, I believe it was, until the warden, he was a chief warrant officer, he had called me in his office. And he's like, your mom's been calling here, and she's been calling your platoon sergeant, and they think you're deployed. They don't even know where you're at. He literally like cursed me out and was like, you're calling your mom right now. And I was like, no, I'm not. And he got her on the phone, and she's like, why didn't you call? And I was like, well, what do you want me to say that I ruined something that I had accomplished that I was really proud of again, and so there was a lot of shame to that. They were very forgiving, and like they didn't understand, because my uncle, struggled with addiction. My grandfather struggled with addiction, but they didn't really understand, the scope of what it would take for me to recover, and me wanting that recovery, that it's not something you can like kind of force onto someone. But they were supportive in their, own way. And they actually came down to see me when I got out. And I just remember I had fell back into my drug use, and I only seen them for like maybe one day of the weekend that they were there. And because I ended up, running around, I was kind of avoiding them and just, not wanting to feel that shame around them and deal with those feelings and emotions. And I ended up moving back to New Orleans. This was, I would say, around 2003. And I continued in my drug use. My family, they weren't they weren't on board with that. I have 2 younger siblings, so you know that wasn't something that they allowed in their home. So I had to kind of figure it out, and so you know I would jump between you know living you know at neighbors' houses or my brother's house or this or that. So I was kind of like you know just jumping around from place to place, and really going through some rough areas. And New Orleans, you know, can be a really you know rough part of town, you know, especially if you're out on the streets. And so, you know, I continued in my addiction. I had met my son's mother at the time. And this was a toxic relationship, you know, and I really got into my addiction, you know, like I had just really got into it aggressively, I would say. And I was mainly doing like cocaine, but everything from like meth to drinking. My drinking was like terrible. So I found out she was pregnant. And I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. If not for me, then I want to get, you know, better for my son, you know, my son to be. And so I had put myself into this, program. It was called Bridge House, and it's a year-long program. I had donated my truck to the program so that I could really be committed to it, and I was doing really well, barely scratching the surface of some of my issues. They're kind of like an AA-based program, so I had to do a lot of like checking inventory and things like that. And about 3 months into that program, Hurricane Katrina, you know, had struck New Orleans. So
I can't help.
Yeah, that did not help. I mean, it just devastated the city. A lot of us, well, all of us had gotten displaced. Like my family had went to Texas at the time. Some of my family went to, you know, other areas. I ended up choosing to go with my pregnant girlfriend at the time to Little Rock, Arkansas with her family. And we were living out of a hotel, you know, off of like FEMA and things like that it was over a few weeks, you know, because they wouldn't even allow anyone to go back to the city, you know, just because there wasn't any resources. And so we ended up deciding, you know, to come to Colorado. She had a cousin that had lived here for a better part of a year, and it was a cousin that we had lived with before in New Orleans. So we decided to move out here. I was actually doing really well. I had started working for this concrete company. I became an assistant plant manager, and you know, I was just working a lot of hours and doing really well. However, you know, I felt very isolated from like family and support. I started like kind of hanging out at social events with friends from work, and it started with drinking non-alcoholic beer, thinking that was okay. But the thing was that I really, excuse me, I really wanted the buzz, you know, I really wanted the numbing feeling, and to avoid those feelings. I didn't understand that at the time, you know, and obviously like the next time I went over there, I had ended up relapsing and getting in a fight with two brothers that were there, and like kicking out a cop car. And so and so I ended up in jail, and you know, it didn't get any better from there. I actually ended up in Denver City again after I'd gotten out on that for some misdemeanor trespassing type thing. They ended up dropping it, but you know, I was really spiraling. I had gotten involved with, you know, a bad crowd, carrying a weapon, getting really invested in my drug use, and my son had been born, you know, throughout that time. So within 6 months' time, I had ended up going into a store, a 7-Eleven, which is actually here in this Aurora community, and actually shooting and killing this clerk, Miss Judy Gallegos Burton. And I say her name because it's super important for me to, to say her name, because she was an innocent person, and she had a life and a family that cared and loved for her. And, it wasn't my intention to go in there and do that. But I had chosen to carry a weapon. I had chosen to drink. I had chosen to associate myself with these individuals. And, regardless of the fact, that's what happened. So, and this was in 2006. So I hadn't even been here for, a year, a little over a year.
Barely in Colorado. Yeah.
Yeah. My son hadn't even, barely turned a year old, or actually he hadn't yet turned a year old at the time. And so, I ended up going on the run for like a week and getting arrested. And I ended up, by the grace of God, getting arrested in El Paso County. There was a huge winter storm that had happened that year. And I remember I-25 was closed, so I couldn't because, obviously I wanted to just run and just avoid the situation till I could just figure things out, but by the grace of God, I was arrested. And I went through, a trial process, which was, a 2-year, little over 2-year process. I ended up getting sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. I was found guilty of first-degree felony murder and second-degree murder. And I took that very hard. I felt like I was ready, or, I wanted to take that accountability, but I took it really hard because I felt like, that wasn't something that I had intended. And, to have been sentenced that, I really, it was very difficult for me. And I remember when I originally went to the county, I was kind of trying to be optimistic and leaning on my faith. And I remember the first incident I had gotten into, I was leaning on my faith thinking okay, things are going to work out, for the good of God. And I had ended up getting into it with some guy, and I ended up getting moved. And I was in another situation where someone was cutting me in a line, and it was these were I was 23 at the time, so I was 150, wet. I was a little skinny kid, thought he knew the world, and scared. And I remember this guy cut in front of me, and I was like, "Hey man, the line's back here, bro," and for the hot water. And he was blew me off. And I remember thinking I'm not gonna do a life sentence, afraid. And I'm not gonna be pushed around or be a victim anymore. And that was what I had told myself. I remember that very clearly. And I remember this guy filling up his cup, and as soon as he filled up his cup with coffee, I went and slapped it all on him, and we ended up getting in a fight. And that was it. I never turned back from that moment. It was I remember thinking, I'm not going to be a victim in here. I'm not going to bow down to no one and all these different things, because I felt like I had the greater part of my life. I was always afraid and just felt I would let things go. And then when I drank, it would, obviously it would blow up, and so I was heavily involved with, gangs when I was in prison. And that really played a huge role in the way I did my time. I ended up, just hurting people while I was in prison, and just doing a lot of violent acts. I felt like either you do that or, it ends up being done to you, and so my prison journey was a lot harder. I made it a lot harder, than it needed to be. I actually ended up getting more time. So I ended up with life without the possibility of parole plus, 5 years because of that. And so I felt like there was no hope. There was no way. Like my lawyer would tell me, like, your appeal is going to go through, and I just didn't, I didn't really see that as, I felt like it was like a dream, and I just didn't feel like I even deserved that, at the time too. So that made it really feel like it wouldn't be a reality. And so the more I got involved, the harder it was for me to get away from that lifestyle. I ended up in CSP, in various times, which is like administrative segregation. I spent years in solitary, and literally on the first facility I went to, I had ended up in a situation where 2 individuals had gotten flight for life, and I ended up in segregation. So I remember thinking after that incident, like, I would sit in that cell and think, like, is this what I'm created for? Like, is this my purpose? Is this all I'm good for? Like, I was like, if that's the case, then I don't even want to live, and I remember asking God to, like, remove that from me, to, like, bind my hands. Like, I knew, I had remember thinking, like, if you are who you say you are, then you can do all things. And I don't want to be hurting people and doing these things. So you're going to have to do this for me, because I feel like I have to do this. And so I remember saying that, and just really struggling, throughout the better part of 10 years. I literally went to Lyman, Buny, CSP, Centennial. I was like making my rounds. I went to Fremont. Like I went to all these different facilities in a matter of, a short period of like 15 years. I had cycled through the entire DOC because I was like a management issue. And I just felt like I was just trying to survive, at the time. By the grace of God, after my second stint in segregation, and I had gotten that, sentenced, to the extra 5 years, I had made my way to Buena Vista. And while I was there, I had gotten word from my appellate lawyer saying that, my felony murder conviction had been overturned. So I remember thinking, like, wow, there,
Out of nowhere, right?
Yeah, it literally just came like out of left field, because I just didn't believe it would ever happen, and I remember thinking, well, I'm going to have to serve, however much time, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. However old I am when I get out, like, regardless, I have to take this, opportunity. And so I had to go back for resentencing. That in itself was an experience. My family all showed up from New Orleans. They all flew down. My son, they all spoke, to the judge and pleaded with him to get, a lenient sentence.
And how long had you been in at that time?
I had spent, it was over 10 years. So I think I was right at close to 11 years at the time. And so like it was just super emotional, because here I am, listening to my family plead for my life, and I hadn't even been like fighting for my own life, all these years, like, or fighting for them, all these years. Like, I had been fighting for the homeboys and what I had thought, and surviving and all this different everything but, my family and myself and my release, and so I had seen the parole board that year, and I remember I got denied for treatment needs. And when you're have a life sentence, you don't get, a lot of opportunities for programming and things like that. So I had wrote the TC, which is Therapeutic Community, the director there at Buena Vista, and I remember, because my case manager had originally told me, you're not eligible, your MRD is way far out, dude. And I was like, well, I'm gonna just write him a letter, and then my buddy wrote the letter for me because he knew I was never gonna do it, and I ended up getting a kite back saying, absolutely, you're on the waiting list. And I remember thinking, man, well, I'm gonna go as soon as I go in, and I was still like involved with gangs at the time, and I remember when I went in, I was like, you know what, I'm kicking back. Like, I remember telling the homeboys, like, I'm good. Like, I'm kicking back. I'm doing me. Like, I've been watching people come in and out all these years. Like, I'm doing something that's for me. Like, whatever however you feel about it, so be it. And that by itself was huge for me, So I did get into the program. And as you know, like, so this therapeutic community, you're like going through encounter games where they're like probing into behaviors and belief systems and thoughts and feelings and tying in like core beliefs, and like really pushing some kind of sensitive areas, some kind of like traumas and things that you may have went through in your life. And so I was really touching in on a lot of those things, and it was difficult. Like, I was very closed off to it at first. And I remember what really made a change for me was on Father's Day, because I had gotten into an argument with some individual, and he had literally like sneakered me like while I was in my cell. So he like hit me when I wasn't looking. And I remember like just looking at this dude like in a rage, like, dude, you know what I'm trying to do, and here you are like putting this in jeopardy. And I remember him just cussing me out, calling me every which name, and I'm just like biting my like holding myself back. I'm still cussing him out as well, but like holding myself back. And I remember he storms out of his room, and I had another individual come up to me, and he was like, man, I seen what happened, man, and that takes a big, before he even got the words out of his mouth, just knowing. Like, I like blew past this guy, went down there, told that youngster, like, get up here. We ended up fighting, and I remember thinking afterward, like, I could possibly be ruining my chances for parole and things like that. And I remember thinking, like, I wanted to stab this dude. Mm-hmm. And I remember because it was Father's Day, like I said, that stood out to me. And I remember talking to my family and them wishing me, happy Father's Day. And I remember thinking, like, all this process of my resentencing and everyone fighting for me, and why am I thinking like this? Mm-hmm. And I was like, normal people do not think this way. And I was like, I have to change the way I think, or I'm never going to get out of prison, And so I really started buying into, everything that they talk about, like the CBT and REBT. I started really reading a lot of self-help books that related to that, like of Albert Ellis, and just a lot of cognitive, behavioral therapy type books, because I wanted to learn it for myself. I wanted to see if what they're preaching to us is, really had some factual basis, and whether it was something I could really apply to my life and it would work. That is crazy, yeah, right? Like, with everything I have going for me now, like, to think that is ridiculous.
You were blessed with something that should have never happened, in the mind frame that you were going to get out. Like, you never thought that would happen, and now that it's happening, you're still going to jeopardize everything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was such a big turnaround for me, because I started really investing in all these groups that they were facilitating. I got involved to where I was like facilitating groups, and eventually even mentoring. Mm-hmm. And I did get paroled. Yes. So at the end of the year, I got paroled. I was actually on the waiting list. I was one of the last individuals to get paroled to Pier 1. And so I was super excited about that. I had progressed to they sent me to my first minimum restrictive yard, which is like no longer concrete walls. You have a window, your walls are made out of sheetrock. You can go to yard, at lots of different times. There's just so much more freedoms. And to me, that was like, I felt like everything was like coming together. Like for me, I started really buying into the possibility of getting out. The week that I was scheduled to go to Pier 1 and get paroled, my case manager had called me in his office because I was at Arrowhead at the time. And he was like, man, you might want to sit down. And I remember because I was thinking like, man, something happened to one of my family members. And he began telling me, he's like, TimeCom made a mistake. They credited you too much time. You're not eligible for parole for another 5.5 years. Do you want to talk to somebody? And I remember I must have been saying the same thing because he was like, you're in shock right now. And I remember feeling like a kind of like an outer body type thing because it didn't feel real. Like I felt like it was almost like I was drowning and like everything was just muffled. And that was a deep blow. I immediately went to go speak to one of the therapists there. And as I was speaking to her, I had COs come into the office and cuff me up, being that now my eligibility had pushed back so far that I was no longer eligible to be in the yard. So I was put in the hole. I didn't even make my rack for them 3 days that I was actually in that hole because I remember sleeping on that plastic mat because I felt so broken and defeated. I never felt so alone, I would say, in my life than at that very time. I mean, I feel like that time was even harder than my original sentence because that was at least something I was expecting to get,
And it accepted.
Yes. And so this one was like, and then I was so fresh from like getting away from the gangs that I remember thinking like, I'm going back to a medium, like in mediums and closes, like these yards, you right away, they have lists. The laundry list, they know who's coming in. Your homeboys are right there waiting for you. And I'm just like, man, I'm going to have to deal with, this and that. And I was like, you know what? I was like, man, I felt a lot of fear coming back on. But most of all, I just felt like defeated, like I was never going to get out, again. They sent me to Fremont and to a mentoring another TC program and to be a mentor there. And I really wasn't feeling it when I first got there. I actually seen a lot of my former therapists there at the symposium today, which is really great, because it comes around full circle and you just get to see these individuals that had such a huge impact on your life. Yeah. And so I got to go there and I really wasn't feeling it. However, I was in a pod with like these individuals that were really like invested in recovery. And they were like some strong individuals that are now working for like the Denver Dream Center, Servicios de la Raza, and all these other community partnerships where now like we're partners out there. Like I reach out to them for resources now, but I didn't know that at the time. I just figured I just got to go here to do my time. And so, I actually ended up relapsing while I was there because as soon as I hit that yard, the homeboys came and actually, gave me some dope. And I remember it burning a hole in my pocket because I had, for like a month, because I had like changed enough to where I felt like I didn't want to poison anyone else. However, I wasn't. It was like, but I wasn't quite there where I didn't want to poison myself because I was hurting so bad, And I ended up relapsing there and like just struggling. And I remember one of my friends, like I was like, you know what? I'm hurting right now, and how is this going to help me get to what I really want, which is my freedom? And I remember thinking, no, it's not. This is not going to help. So I had to, come clean to some of my peers and tell them, like, if you see me out on the yard, then I'm on some BS, so hold me accountable. And really, because that's what they teach you is accountability and transparency, and all these different things. And so that was huge for me because, knowing that I gave them my word, I had to stick with it and know that they're watching me and, looking out for me and things like that. And so I got back on track. I ended up mentoring there for over 2.5 years and working my way back down to that MR, and mentoring there some more until finally I became eligible for community. So after the years had passed, after this, heartache and hardship and just struggle and all these different things, like I had really like grown a lot from this experience. I was hurt, don't get me wrong. I still, carry that pain with me because it was raw. But I had grown in my conviction. I had grown to where I really like stepped away from the game to where I was like, you know what, I'm good. Like, do whatever you want. Like, I'm good. Like, I'm done. That's not who I am. Like, I was able to finally get to a point where I was able to say that out loud and like stand on that and like make choices to where I was like helping individuals, also try to get out of that, speaking positivity and, mentoring individuals that were also in that same background and demographic. And so it was awesome, and it was like building up my self-efficacy and my, self-esteem and, just removing some of that shame and guilt, from my past and building up my self-worth. So it was a process. When I became eligible for community, another blessing that came out of that was my victim's family hadn't contacted me at all, up until that point. And I guess they were notified when I did become eligible again. And so my victim's daughter had reached out to me, and she's like, basically like, I want to know what, before I speak to them, whether I think or not you should get released, I want to know what you've been doing. And I spoke to her and I was like, basically, I had prayed on it before, writing her this letter. And I basically was like, there's nothing I could say or do to ever justify or to bring back or to fix, or to rectify what I've done or what I've taken from you. I was like, my mom has been such a support for me throughout this process. She's been there for my ups, downs, because she came visited me in CSP and, in the box and seen them bring me in chains, and through glass visits and like just really going through the struggles. And I'm like, my mom was there for all of that. And I stole that from you. And I was like, I apologized to her, and I basically told her, this is what I'm doing now. This is what I learned about myself. This is what I want to do with my life. And she ended up advocating for my release. She wrote me a letter and was like, so awesome. Advocated for my release. And it was such a blessing to get, a little bit of closure and just some, level of forgiveness, and just to be able to receive that was such a blessing for me. And it's huge now to be able to, stand on who I am today because of that act of grace, and forgiveness. And so I did end up going through community corrections. And while I was in community corrections, I had a friend of mine, Kenneth Freeman. He's actually one of our operation managers for Hazelbrook Sober Living. And he was like, you know what, this position came up, case management, outreach case management. I think you'd be great at it. You've been mentoring guys while you're in prison. I feel like you might as well get paid for what you've been doing for free all these years. And I was like, okay, I'll definitely, he was like, I'll put your name in the hat. And I interviewed with Jess and Gino, and, they asked me, about my past and where I am now. And they were like, you have the job. And I was like, wow, this is great. I get to, really give back and get involved in the community. So I was like going from the halfway house to, our community center and like working with individuals. And then they put me through a peer coaching academy, and I was able to, start doing that. And so it was just, blessing after blessing. I became a supervisor, a housing supervisor at one point for transitional safety zone housing, which is basically harm reduction transitional housing for individuals that are coming in off of active addiction to be able to, get into sober living, you know, provide that access to be able to provide that negative UA and get into, you know, sober living. And so I did that for a while as well, you know, and I've recently gotten back into outreach case management just because I started going to school full time, and it was a lot better, more of a flexible fit. So I'm in my 3rd semester of college now.
Congratulations.
That's
you. Really awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
How old are you, if I can ask?
What's that?
Do you mind to ask how old you are?
I just turned 40 this last year.
In your 3rd year of college.
Yes.
That's
thank
right.
you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because it's never too late to go back.
No,
That's
not
right.
at all.
Never.
Let's spread that. You know?
Yeah, and I actually spent my 40th in Hawaii, so it was awesome.
Yeah.
While on parole. So it was just like so many blessings that have come, you know, in these past few years. And then so basically doing that really prepped me for now, you know, doing in reach. Like I've been able to go into some of the prisons now and do some in reach and, like, you know, try to provide them individuals with hope where I was at. You know, a lot of these individuals that I left behind, just seeing them and seeing the life, like, wow, bro, like, we know where you came from. We were here with you. Like, we, you know, we were in the trenches with you, like, to see where you're at now. And it's super motivating for me, encouraging for me to keep doing what I'm doing. And then I actually recently got involved. Tomas is actually a part of this. We were invited to be a part of this, like, it's called SAVE, Standing Against Violence Every Day, which is a task force for gang violence, you know, gun violence here in the city of Aurora, you know, and it was, I completely didn't expect it to be such a big, I guess, effort, you know. When we went to speak this past week, there was literally, like, the chief of police, the DA, what is it, the attorney general, there was the mayor, and they all spoke, you know, right before Tomas and I had to speak. So it was super humbling, just to be, you know, on the other side, you know, of, you know, these my bad choices, you know, and just to be on the other side.
You have a lot to give back, so
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of what you're supposed to do now.
Absolutely, yeah. I definitely feel like a duty to do that now. So that's, you know, been very huge, and just being a part of that, and now, you know, coming here, even sharing my story, like, I mean, it's so awesome to just be a part of this recovery community. I love our community partners. Like, I work with so many individuals that got out and that were, like, juvenile lifers, and they're all just doing great things, you know. You know, something stood out to me. It was one of the individuals had said at that event, they were like, you know, I'm glad to see you're doing well. You know, that doesn't necessarily happen, you know, too often. And I was thinking, like, you know, actually it does. You know, like, from my experience, like, these individuals that I've seen that had a lot of time and really invested in their recovery, they're doing great. Like, these are the individuals I could lean on and, like, reach out to help individuals get out of those situations. So I'm just super fortunate to have had so many people, like, support me in my recovery, everything from my therapist to my peers to my family to, you know, my lovely fiance right now. Like, she's been such a huge help, because a lot of that stuff that, you know, you think you're gonna just leave it in there, but you bring it out. Like, I have a lot of issues with, like, post-traumatic stress and just, like, high anxiety and a lot of things that have surfaced, you know, throughout my, you know, integration back into society. But, you know, not giving into those fears and using those tools and leaning on these individuals for support. Like, I couldn't have done it without all that. Like, community is, like, key, you know, that with the foundation of my faith, you know, have just been so foundational for where I'm at today.
You also had to make a conscientious decision of changing how you act and what you do on a daily basis. You talked a lot about being involved in gangs and the violence in prison and being so entrenched in that I literally could hear you saying that I was a different person. How
Absolutely.
I spoke, how I talked, how I walked, what I liked, what I did, my personal hobbies, not that you have many in prison, but all of those things were for a different person than who you are now. How did you get to that point of where you are now? You had to conscientiously make these decisions on, I'm going to speak differently, I'm going to act differently.
Absolutely.
So
I'm
what was
so
that
glad
like?
you touched on that. Yeah, so when I went through the TC in Buny, we have actually single cells there, and they're like old cells, like bars, and like it was like we're in Upper North, and it's like one of them old facilities, one of the older facilities, in Colorado, and it. But I had that single cell, and I remember when I wanted to change the, like my thinking and my behavior, I remember really digging into, my Bible and the Word of God, and actually putting into practice, a lot of that discipline, like changing the way I speak, like really. I found out a lot of the things that I said was negative, and derogatory or like aggressive, and I had to like take a step back, and sometimes I wouldn't talk, like I just wouldn't, talk for a while.
Listen
I wouldn't
before
watch
you
TV.
speak.
Yes. And I would remove myself from other stimulation. Like I listen to certain type of music and things like that. And I found like, the more I did that or the less I did of this, I started getting different outcomes. And so I really started, stressing the importance of what I'm putting in and what I'm putting out. And don't get me wrong, like I still cuss, and
Still like
get
a
in
violent
my anger,
like a violent R-rated movie, and listen to a hardcore hip hop song sometimes.
Yeah,
put some
absolutely.
DMX on. Yeah, I get it.
Absolutely.
DMX,
But I
yes,
try to
okay.
limit it. Absolutely, yeah. Our Rough Riders and 504 boys, shout out.
One, two. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Come
but
on,
I,
Lil Wayne. Come on, New
yeah,
Orleans.
yeah. But I found I can't do that
No,
all
yeah,
the time.
yeah, exactly.
Now, and I had to limit that
And not try to
drastically.
follow that lifestyle either, which it's very common for all of us to follow. Well, your celebrities, to follow the culture, the hip hop culture. It's cool to be like this, and a lot of times that's gang culture, and it's derogatory, and it's overly aggressively sexual, and so on. So you have to conscientiously go, I'm listening to it, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, like really, you have to like really look and like say like, well, who do I want to be? Who am I, and who do I want to be, and how is this helping me be that person? And it was like there was a lot of growing pains in that. Like for a long time, you've heard where I had like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and I was like kind of like on a razor's edge. Like my mom would just always say, it always sticks with me, because she'll say, take that leap of faith. And I'm like, easy for you to say, like, I'm living here. Like you go home, like I have to face these individuals. Like these doors close and it's me and someone else, and I've seen and been a part of like some horror stories, like things that like, there's no secret that it's just not possible to not, carry that and be traumatized over some of those things, and so yeah, it took a lot. It really did take a lot of effort and like wanting soul searching and practice, and a lot of times I kind of like kind of overlook that, from where I'm at today. But those were months and years. I didn't realize like that was actually been months and years to where I was practicing those things, like who I sat with. There was like mockery and things like that, little snickers, and sometimes like I feel like God knew what I could handle, because sometimes there would be like snickers behind my back, because he knew my pride at the time couldn't handle it. So, but God was just graceful in like, giving me what I could handle, and like really putting me in situations to where I felt like I had ways out, and so
I think it's
wonderful.
important. I really appreciate you saying that, how influential God was in where you are today, because there was a point where you said, that you they gave you another 5 years. You thought you were getting out, you were getting another 5 years. And what popped in my head at that time was God was saying, all right, I want to see if you're really ready.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to give you 5 more years to see if you're really ready.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise you're going to get out and you ain't ready and you're going to be back.
Yeah,
You know?
faith isn't faith unless it's tested. You know?
Exactly.
And you
Yes,
were tested
yes.
multiple times.
Absolutely.
Multiple times on your faith.
Yeah, a lot, and I think that really served to build like strong conviction. Now in knowing who I am, knowing who I was like raised, the man that I was raised to be, and taking the steps to get there
And become
that person.
Yes.
That
to
was
reinvent
something
myself.
that really touched me about your story too, John, was your mom. Just how much
Oh yeah,
your
she's a
mom's
soldier.
faith and just the hope that she had. She never gave up hope.
Oh, never.
Never one time.
Never. She would visit me in CSP and was like, I would be like, you know what, Mom? It got to a point where I was like, you know what? You need to just forget about me. And she's like, what? Like, you ain't going to tell me who to love and how long to love and when to stop loving. She was like, I remember that stuff with me. And I was like, okay. She was like, I'm going to keep coming up, regardless. And she did. She would bring her and my dad. They would bring my son up, at least once a year, if not every 2 years. And they would come up like twice a year. So I did have a lot of support in that regard, and they supported me financially while I was incarcerated. So I did have a lot of support. I just needed to lean on that, and support myself too.
Yeah, believe in yourself, and then just that renewed sense of hope.
Yes, that's huge. That is so huge. To have some hope like that. Like those long sentences, like a life without the possibility for parole, I just feel like that's just such a hard sentence to try.
That's why you ended up with 5 more years, because
No hope.
you had no hope at a point.
Yeah, not at all. Nothing I could nothing tangible.
It's a miracle that you're here now.
It is. It truly is. I'm super grateful. And there's no looking back. Like after that, like I feel like, I was blind and now I could see, and I just want to run toward that light.
All right, with our last couple of minutes here, you're now working as a social work case manager at Hazelbrook Sober Living.
Yes.
How does that feel?
It feels great. Like, I love what I do. I love being able to support individuals. I love being able to just reach them where they're at, meet them where they're at and connect with them on a level that many people aren't able to connect with them, to empathize with their situation and to just support them and give them that hope and motivation and just breathe life into them. A lot of these individuals, they don't realize their potential. And that's the saddest part. When I tell them, I'm like, dude, like, you have the potential for greatness. Like, this isn't your purpose. Your purpose wasn't to be, in drug addiction and just, live in squalor. You have a great purpose, and it's up to you to, walk in that purpose and become, that individual that you were meant to be. So I love being that. I love the platform. I love the opportunity that, my employers have given me. I love our community partners and relationships. I just love, being in part of, this recovery community. They're my extended family.
Do you have an office number people can reach you at?
Yes, that's 720-357-7238.
720-357-7238?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. John Doubleday from New Orleans, Louisiana.
The Big Easy.
The Big Easy has been our guest. Dude, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yep.
One last thing with these last couple of minutes. Judy Gallegos, her daughter spoke on your behalf to help you get released from prison. How much is that an important part of your recovery and where you are today?
That was huge. Just because I carried a lot of shame and just kind of regret and more so shame, for that. And, and I had to like really get to a place where I can forgive myself. So where I wouldn't use that as an excuse to continue in my behavior. And I think that was so key to hear that, to really like them hard days where, I'm really struggling and really just afraid or want to go back to some type of behavior. Like,
yeah, that's what I think what I was trying to say is how much is that part of what makes you never ever turn back?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. Just that grace and forgiveness. Like now I'm able to take that also into like when people, talk to me kind of short or are or maybe disrespectful or like struggling in their recovery, I'm able to just kind of like, I know the grace that was shown me. So I'm able to just kind of put my personal feelings to the side and like really connect with them and try to support them in whatever they're going. So it was huge. It's been huge.
My mother passed away and she saw me sober before she passed away. And that's kind of like what I cling to. Like that's my torch that I hold on to is my mother. That's how she saw me. And so I got to keep going like that. And in some ways I find it similar that you did this for you, but you also have to keep doing this for her.
Yeah, I definitely feel duty bound.
Yeah, you have to keep doing this for her.
Absolutely.
John Doubleday, our guest. New Orleans, the Big Easy, Louisiana. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Mile High, if you missed any of this program and you want to hear it in its entirety, please look for it on all of your podcasting apps. You can also find us on YouTube at Sharing Our Stories and on Facebook.com/SOS Sharing Our Stories. Please like, share, and subscribe. Share this program. If you know somebody that needs to listen to it, email it to it, pass it to them, text it to them. And please, thank you for being a part of Sharing Our Stories. And we hope that you join us again next week right here.